Before we begin, thank you very much to the Ringleader for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the help. Thank you very much for contributing and keeping the channel going. Everyone who pitches into the Patreon is helping me keep the daily content coming and hopefully is paying for some very, very big things that are still making progress. I'm very excited to show you guys. I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you everyone for allowing me to continue to do this for you. So, as far as this is concerned, this has been exploding. Like, I feel like the last week of Transformers has produced more news than some entire years of this franchise. It's absolute insanity. It's bedlam. It's chaos. It's tomfoolery. I don't know. There's so much going on at one time, but we have to take turns and talk about these things one at a time. And today we're talking about what's on screen right now, which is the fact that Transformers is doing a crossover series with Monster Hunter, which blows my mind. So for those unaware, Monster Hunter is one of my favorite video games ever. I got into it at 3 Ultimate with some friends kind of like pushing me, like nudging me to go play the game with them. And I loved it. I absolutely love the gameplay, the customization. I love this game. So as part of the whole T-Sparks Synergen X thing, we have actual Transformer Monster Hunter toys on the way. And now my brain is exploding. Now there's just like so many options in my brain. Now, for starters, let's get this out of the way. This is not a new concept. Soul of Chogokin has already done this. They did a Rathalos Hunter that actually is a full transforming figure. What you don't see there is behind the shield in the left hand is a Rathalos head, kind of like T-Rex Megatron-ish, with, his big head as the arm. And it is fully transforming. The shield becomes the wings, the sword becomes the tail, and it all becomes this thing, which is deliciously heavy and with diecast in proper Soul of Chogokin spots. It's actually designed for it, but also sharp. I've literally drawn blood from handling this figure, and it's only made me enjoy it more because it feels so appropriate. So this is not necessarily a new concept, but this is the actual Transformers people doing this. And it does raise some concerns, right? So for starters, we just got to see the Godzilla Transformers, and that is incredibly disappointing. But because those were fully revealed so soon, so close to the announcement, there is a presumption that they could be a last-minute inclusion and that these will have a lot more time to cook and be a little bit more interesting. There is also the factor of how they handled the Zoids crossover, because that one also had some issues because it's just retools, It's mostly repainted models with a few new parts added in. So it's a little bit iffy about what we are actually going to get. I don't think we're going to get the full collaborative treatment of like brand new molds, the way that, Knight Rider and Ninja Turtles recently enjoyed. But I do think we're going to get modifications of existing molds, or at the most a gigawatt situation where it's the same engineering but completely retooled, all brand new parts, just using the same transformation. So looking at that, we start going through the plethora of Transformers that we could go through to actually create these characters. And I think the first thing people jump to is the Dragon Megatron, because, hey, Monster Hunter is full of dragons, so obviously we're going to use this one, right? I think people have already been calling for this one to become the Rathalos. It's not going to work. I don't think this mold works for the Rathalos for a few reasons. Number one, I'm not entirely sure this toy is capable of being horizontal and standing on its legs at the same time. The way that a Rathalos has to stand. I haven't tested it out myself, but I'm not entirely sure it's capable of that. Not to mention, the proportions are going to be off. Like, a Rathalos doesn't have giant legs like that, if you really think about it. Also, the Rathalos isn't technically a dragon. It's a wyvern. Wyverns don't have little appendage arms like this Megatron does, and more importantly, the wings on a wyvern are mounted where our arms are, because those are the arms of a wyvern. So the back-mounted wings on this Megatron aren't going to work. Also, I think the left arm is going to end up like really short and stubby because if you take the neck down. So yeah, this isn't going to work for a lot of this. Now, that doesn't mean it's unusable. Kushala Daora actually does have a much more traditional European dragon look to it. This would be a lot more viable to turn into Megatron. You know, this one would be more reliable to use for that mold. But we want to get that one out of the way first, right? So just because like I don't think that mold is actually as appropriate as a lot of people are immediately jumping to, right? There are more obvious ones to go to, and there are easier ones to do. For instance, our normal Beast Wars Megatron, you know, the actual purple T-Rex. We've already mentioned him once, ironically enough. But this one is an obvious one for anyone who has played enough Monster Hunter. You know, in any hunt, at any time, fear the appearance of a Devil Joe. So the Angry Pickle here is very easy to do from a T-Rex figure. No surprise there. So yeah, like Beast Wars Megatron would be a really apt choice for this one. Very, very easy to do, honestly. Yeah, and if really practically, if they're going to get a figure like this, that seems to be like the quickest route is to just make the Devil Joe out of Kingdom Megatron. That just seems to be the quickest route you could go to actually produce something. And I started looking at other Beast Wars, like other dinosaurs that we have recent molds of, and then you're looking at things like, Dinobot here. So, there are a lot of like dragons and wyverns in this franchise, but there are also just normal style raptors, so like we're looking at things like the Great Jaggy and all of the iterations of a giant raptor that are in all of these games. And we even have an option here. So you remember that core class Dinobot that never actually materialized? It might end up being the final core class released in Generations. But right now, we have not seen it. All we have is a computer listing saying that one may potentially exist. But if it's gone into development far enough for it to be a computer listing, that means it might actually be available to actually turn this Dinobot as a Great Jaggy into like a full, to have like a full like pack that comes with it, like little Jaggia to go with him. Things like that popped into my mind as I started figuring out what would be the best part here. What would make this like a really cool crossover? And I started going through a lot of those motions, what Beast Wars toys could you adapt into Monster Hunter creatures and things like that. I started looking at Tiger Hawk and just thinking like, okay, there's Zenogre proportions in there if you really want to go for it. That is potentially a thing to do, but the more I started playing around with this and the more I started looking at my options, the more I just felt like something's not right here. Something's missing from this concept. I mean, yeah, it's easy to just go like, this Transformer mold would work as this Monster Hunter creature. But it really isn't, Like, at some point, you just feel like it's missing, like, a soul of this series. And there's something about it that just feels like, it's not a complete package yet. So I started thinking this. I went back from the ground up, and I started over again. And I was trying to figure out, okay, number one, we know, like, I don't think there's a doubt that it's going to be a Rathalos, right? That's going to be the one they do. They're going to make a Rathalos. And if they're going to use an existing mold, what else could there be? And how do I get more Monster Hunter into this? And then I started looking. And what is in this picture that is not in any of the photos we have seen so far in this slideshow? The hunter. There's a hunter aspect missing from this. And I feel like that becomes necessary. Like even like the Revoltex and the monster arts that they've done have had little hunter figures to go with them. Because that's kind of the thing. Whether it's the standard games and you're hunting them, or it's Monster Hunter stories and you're riding them, it's all about the relation, the hunter and the monster. And this is when it dawned on me. We have an entire line of toys that you could adapt into Monster Hunter figures and still capture that magic. We call it Titan's Return. So, you have a fully fledged Transformer robot in Robot, and because it's Takara, it'll most likely be existing characters, right? It'll be Optimus Prime as a Rathalos or whatever. But when you transform it into the beast mode, when you actually transform it into the Monster Hunter creature, that head is going to come off and it's going to turn into a small hunter to pair with the figure. Not a pilot, but an actual little hunter, painted and hopefully sculpted to kind of look as close as we can get to the actual Monster Hunter design. That's where this started feeling like the right idea. This is where it dawned on me. This is the missing element. These molds would be perfect for this. Now keep in mind, we can reuse the engineering and still just kind of like do our own thing here. We don't necessarily need to be strict to what this is. So a bat could potentially be a Rathalos. You retool the head. Well, you're going to retool everything. But now the head has to point forward and, or up from this perspective. And the toy would need new arms so that they could form into legs that could reach all the way underneath the belly and stand horizontally. But this is a mold that could actually work for that. You could even take that shield and retool it into his tail, and that becomes an arm-mounted weapon for the robot mode. This is the way to do it. And for those going like, what, you're going to make them deluxes? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. You know what the most popular Monster Hunter toys are? They're little 3-inch figurines, blind box figurines. They've done a ton of them. So it's not a matter of size, it's how you use it. Okay, look, I have to go this route because we have very few Voyagers that we can use for this concept, and this is just too good. These molds work so well to present both Monster and Hunter. Take Skullcruncher, for instance. There are so many belly crawlers we can use for Skullcruncher. And the most obvious one, I think, there's a lot of obvious ones. But one of the first ones I thought of was more recent. It's the Great Jagras. And yeah, it's a big belly crawling lizard. This is an easy one to adapt into an actual Skullcruncher design. If I'm picking favorites here, I've always kind of liked the Royal Ludroth. The sponge is probably going to have to come off and become a shield or a backpack or something. This one might take a bit of part forming, but on a crossover figure, I kind of understand limitations like that. You know the great thing about the Skullcruncher mold, though? The head folds onto the back as a backpack, and the tail just comes off as a weapon, meaning we can play around with this a lot. We don't have to stick to the proportions so much. If we wanted to turn Skullcruncher into a Lagiacrus, that's viable. We could absolutely do that, and I would absolutely love that. We don't see this one anymore because they took out the underwater hunting, but I love the design. I've always really liked the Lagiacrus. I would love for him to have a toy, and I think that would actually work. The one that got me a little bit was Weird Wolf. And now, Weird Wolf, yes, there are wolf monsters, wolf-ish monsters in Monster Hunter, but they are very few and far between. We have the Lunagaron, and that is absolutely just a scaled wolf, and it looks awesome. It looks super cool, but it's not necessarily what I think of when I think of Monster Hunter. It's not one of those more iconic, this monster by heart type monsters. So I started thinking about it, and I realized we don't have to stick to the beasts specifically. As long as the body shape is correct, we can do retooling on the rest of it to make it work, which is where I started looking at just the body shape of Weird Wolf rather than just the fact that he is a wolf. Meaning that if I really wanted to, I could sneak a Nargacuga into this. It would actually work. It is wolf-like proportions, but it has those wings on the arms. And you could do the tooling to fix that. You could do the tooling to add those in. We just did it to Filch out of the Air Razor mold. We can do things like that. And keep in mind, because this idea would be, like the extensive retool, like just reusing the transformation scheme rather than, trying to cram a character into an existing mold. Hello, Godzilla, Megatron. That means we can play around with this a lot more. We can make it organic and, like it, look like the monster, or we can be playful and make it look robotic and make it look like a, robotic version of a wyvern. That's on the table as well. I'm not going to leave the Voyagers out, by the way. So, Alpha Trion here. I've always liked this toy. There's a lot of people who do not like this figure. I've always really liked this figure. I thought the idea of the spaceship that also becomes a lion is such a unique idea for a triple changer, and I love how the robot mode looks. If I look at this one, I look at that big lion mode, I start to think Magnamalo. And that is an exciting sounding figure to me. I think this would look awesome. Can you imagine how cool the robot mode would look with the Magnamalo head as the shoulder pauldrons? Oh my god, that would look sick. Oh, I would love that. Like, you turn those arm blades on the arms into, like, things that you, like, pop off, so you could turn them into dual blades for the robot mode. Yeah, and then you, like, you turn the tail into a lance. This would work so good. I love it. And while we're on the Voyagers, by the way, there's my choice for Devil Joe, because we're not going to leave Devil Joe out of this line. We've got another T-Rex in this line that we can use, so we can actually incorporate this. Also, I think the most terrifying thing I can possibly fathom is a Devil Joe that's capable of turning into a subsonic jet to chase you. Or a supersonic jet. What am I talking about? Jeez. That's horrifying. That is horrifying. Maybe that's how Devil Joe just always appears at the worst moment. Maybe he flies in. I don't know. But that is possible too. I wish there were more options for Ape Face. I mean, technically, there are simian monsters in the game. We can make it a Rajang, then maybe. Then you have these huge horns on the head. The helmet might have to be like a separate piece that folds onto the back in order to give the headmaster room to leave. That one's a little bit trickier, but I think it's doable, but it's a little bit trickier. There are some monsters that actually do have these large front limbs, and you could just make him like a quadruped that has long arms. But I do like a different mold for an idea like that. For instance, Grotusk actually works really well for a lot of this. Yeah, you'd have to give him new arms that are a little bit longer, but he has body proportions and shapes that could work for a lot of different monsters. Ape Face or Grotusk would actually make a decent figure for the Zinogre, who commonly stands, like head high, big body, giant front legs, and then smaller rear legs. And both of those toys would work for that proportion. It would also work for my favorite, and the one I would die if this actually became a figure, Brachydios. I don't care if Capcom pronounces it Brachydios. That's a terrible sounding name with a hard D right in the middle of it. No, Brachydios flows off the tongue. It sounds like a much better name. So yeah, there's your trivia for the day. That's my favorite monster in all of Monster Hunter. And given the fact that I started with 3 Ultimate, that really shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. But no. Yeah, this is just... I think this is a banger idea. The Titan Return molds to present Hunter and Monster is so perfect. Even if you wanted to do this, pattern this after Monster Hunter stories. So keep in mind, we can do the Rathalos from those games. That's the scary thing. If we do one Rathalos, that opens us up to Rathian as a retool. That opens us up to Azure Rathalos, Silver Rathalos, Pink Rathian, Gold Rathian. All the variations, including the ones from Monster Hunter stories. So the headmaster isn't a hunter, it's a rider. You could do that too. So there are so many ways And I actually have hopes, because if we learned anything from the presentation Takara did, they're doing more Zoids Monster Hunters, which means that took off really, really well. So we're very, very likely, if the Transformer ones do well, they might continue that partnership as well, and we get even more. So a lot on this list are actually completely viable. But those are my hopes. Those are my hopes. Not even completely new toys, which would be cool. But yeah, like I feel like the Titan Return figures just present such a cool opportunity to make these figures. Let me know in the comment below what you think. Am I on to like the best idea ever, or would you rather just have the monsters straight as they look from the game and just transform? Because I worry that's going to be as simple as the Shield Liger Optimus looks like right now. But still, we all have to wait and to find out. But until then, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.